Hi everyone, welcome. As you can hear from our bells, it is noon, so welcome to our April Alumni webinar. My name is Robin McLaughlin. I'm the Associate Alumni Director here at Northwood. Today we have joining us our Director of Counseling at Northwood, Andy Sovis, who will be presenting on moving together, creating a culture of wellness. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please use the Q&A feature to submit those. We will have time at the end to answer any of those questions for Andy. Andy has been the Director of Counseling at Northwood since summer of 2021. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in social work and has over 18 years experience in the mental health field, which of the last 10 have been in higher education. He is trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, mindfulness, and is a mental health first aid certified. Andy also has 10 years of experience as a licensed mental health therapist and owns his own practice here in Midland, the area. Thank you, Andy, for joining us today.
Thank you, Robin. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining. Really looking forward to having this conversation about really just kind of sitting back and talking a little bit about our campus and some initiatives that we're doing to create kind of culture of wellness as we're going to be talking about today. One of the things that we'll see is on this screen right here, I want to put some attention to some information from UC Davis. It's from their student health center. And this example really kind of highlights how dimensional wellness is, right? It's not just one component. Now, if we were to spend time today talking about all these, I think it would take several hours to kind of cover this. So we really want to think about what are some key areas that we're doing here at Northwood's campus, and then also thinking, from a corporate structure too. There's lots of people joining the call today from different backgrounds and different areas. I want to think not just efforts that are happening on the college campus, but also things that maybe happen in a professional environment. But we really want to focus on two areas. Those two areas we're going to look at today are going to be emotional. And to define those can be really broad topics and really kind of cover a lot of detailed information. So I want to give a couple examples of things that we're doing here, but also not focus so much on one definition of what social or emotional health may be, but more look at some examples of how it impacts us. So I really want to think about this approach to think, okay, how does the social emotional learning and environment create a place that builds connection? And that's kind of been a theme of something that I've noticed, as Robin mentioned, it started here in the fall of 21. And as we're coming out of kind of the post-COVID pandemic isolation, we've seen a lot in the mental health field, a lot of articles that talk about disconnection. And we know disconnection not only impacts students here on a college campus, but also impacts corporate environments, employee wellness, employee longevity, turnover rates. Right, so different kind of multiple aspects and things that can be impacted. So when we think about creating this culture, it as in the picture here, it kind of shows there's a lot of different things that can be done. So focusing on these two kind of emotional and social areas, I think is going to be just a good place for us to spend some time today. When we think about initial impact and things that we're doing here on the campus, we're really looking at building in different curriculum when it comes to our freshman kind of FDN classes. We've also been working on in the last year some athletic performance based that has to do with emotional and social kind of environment and building some of that resiliency. We also think about increasing just student participation on campus, right? So for several years, there was a lot of online kind of virtual learning, and that connection wasn't really happening in the way that it often would happen just in a classroom environment, or even in meetings that I'm sure a lot of you have been attending now, more regular face-to-face meetings. The meetings provide a structure, but sometimes it's the after piece and the conversations that happen after the meeting ends, those kind of side conversations, or what we used to call the water cooler conversations, that actually adds a ton of value to those situations. So I think, looking at the age group that we have on this campus and the young adults and young individuals, they went through some different kind of situations than I think some of us older adults did. We had jobs, professions, other things that kind of keep us going. We also already went through those times in our lives where we maybe built connections or failed at relationships or had the permission to fail well. So I really think that's kind of the key component when we talk about social and emotional health and building that culture and that connection. From a learning perspective, here's what I really think. So I'm very much kind of a visual and stories help me understand things. So when I think of kids and I think of how they learn how to take care of themselves, I really think of this example. So say there's a 4-year-old that falls down and they skin their knee. And in that kind of self-care area, we know that typically maybe 4 or 5-year-old is going to know that they need a Band-Aid. So they take care of themselves. They get a Band-Aid, they cover it up, they go keep playing. And that's something that I think where we put the physical health in some ways above and beyond the mental health components. So when we know that a young individual can do those kind of things, we think, well, what are we doing to help teach individuals how to care for themselves if they feel like a failure, they feel alone, disconnection? What are the tools, what are the Band-Aids that they go kind of invest in or that they have as options for them to be able to use? About creating those opportunities. And I think part of that, like I said, building some of those within the curriculum that we're providing here, some of the different initiatives. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the specific mental health initiatives that we're taking on here on campus. But I also think about that idea of how do we become aware, how we act, feel, or behave, especially in the emotional and social health area. So think about this example. So let's say today, this afternoon, or this evening, you're going to go meet a colleague or a coworker at a coffee shop, and you're pulling up to this building, and it's at a downtown setting. It's a perfect spot right in front of the building, but it's parallel parking. And maybe your first thought is, sure, I'm good at this, or I'm worried about bumping into a car behind me, or there's a Cadillac behind me and I don't want to bump into it, or I don't want to scrape up my rims. We start kind of second guessing ourselves a little bit. And as we're trying to park, we see our friend or colleague looking at us in the window, kind of waving at us. We're getting a little, right, having a little pressure put on us, getting a little nervous. So then we think, okay, I've got this. And we try it and it isn't quite working out as well. Or we look in our rearview mirror and all of a sudden there's 5 cars behind us and they're honking their horns. So it creates a lot of nervousness energy. So we say, okay, I can't do this. I'm going to avoid it. So go 3 blocks away, find somewhere else, kind of park. In the meantime, we're feeling kind of that emotional feelings of running a little late, feeling embarrassed. But now the weather changes and all of a sudden it starts downpouring. So now we're 3 blocks away. So we're soaking wet, feeling embarrassed. All of these kind of build-ups and these add-ups, it doesn't mean that someone's not a good parking person or that they're not a good driver. It's more of what we do to avoid some of that discomfort, right? That emotional discomfort. And that's maybe the better definition when we think about emotional and social health is, how do we behave the way that we behave? Why do we function that way? And what information can we do to kind of collect from that area? So in that parallel parking example, we think, okay, well, where's the avoidance? How is this impacting? And one of the things that I think can highlight this is this idea of called valued-based living. And this is, right, some of the practical kind of components that I think we might be able to incorporate into not only in our work environment or educational setting, but also in our personal lives. So with this idea of what's called valued-based living, kind of asks us and helps us to understand why we do what we do or how we function the way that we function. So as everyone's sitting here today, I want you to think about a couple of key values that you have in your life. I'm going to share some, maybe they connect with you, maybe they don't. So let's just think of the 4 key values. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify those values on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being not very important, 10 being super important, probably the most important thing in my life. So let's think about family, work, income, and health. So on one side of the scale, so imagine it's kind of a spreadsheet and there's 2 columns. First column will be, how important do I rank this value? So on a scale of 1 to 10, if I say family is an 8, so pretty high up there. So I ask, okay, I value that. It's something that I really think a lot about, means a lot to me. When we look at the other side, I also then want to think a little bit about, well, what does my behavior tell me about that value? So if I say that family is very important to me, but then I look at my behavior and I say, well, do I call for birthdays? Do I send cards for anniversaries? Do I make the effort? Do I make that connection? And maybe I say, well, my behavior is really a 6. So then we see there's a discrepancy between the two. There's a couple of things that we can do in that moment to try to understand what is that discrepancy. And say, well, do I want to readjust my value down to a 6 to match the behavior? Do I want to move the behavior up to an 8 so that they align? Or am I at a place in life where I'm not able to change either one of those, but I have to then be okay or content with the discrepancy? And sometimes it's just about creating that awareness of understanding how we think, feel, and behave, and how that kind of comes out in the actions that we take. But the bigger part of the value-based living is sometimes when we feel maybe a little off socially or emotionally, sometimes don't know what's happening. And what I like to try to do is take the mystery out of life. Why do I think and feel the way that I think and feel? When we do that, it's about creating awareness. So if we really look at our behavior that's happening on a daily basis, we then think, does it align with one of those key values? And if it does align with one of those key values, then chances are when we go to bed at the end of the evening, we put our head on our pillow, we will have less of those ruminating thoughts or those reoccurring thoughts of second guessing ourselves. Thinking, did I do the right thing? Did I say the right thing? How did I behave in that moment? Because if our behavior aligns with those values and there's not a discrepancy between them, then chances are we're going to reflect back on that moment as being content. And I say that as a way to kind of introduce the deeper understanding of social and emotional health, right? I gave that example earlier about physical health, about the little kid being able to go put a Band-Aid on a cut. But when we talk about teaching resiliency and talking about self-care and creating a culture of wellness, we think, well, what do we do to care for ourselves? First, how are we aware? What are we aware of? What our behavior tells us of why we might think and feel the way we do. Then what are we actually doing about it? How are we building some of that connection? And it really takes me to this recent kind of initiative that we've started here through the Counseling Center called the I Hear You Project. And what that comes out of really comes out of the alumni Project 100, which is a really great opportunity for alumni to be able to kind of get involved with having impact here on campus. And the Counseling Center had the fortunate opportunity to be awarded the Project 100 grant. And as a result of that, we started this new kind of mental health initiative on campus. But the way that this all started was because of connection. I mentioned that earlier about building this kind of culture of wellness, but it also really kind of comes down to building connection. So one day I was out on the fields at softball, just kind of having a discussion with coach. I try to be in front of students and student athletes as much as possible, not just be sitting in an office and say, oh, students, you need to go see the counselor. It's really trying to be in front of them as much as possible. And as a result of that conversation with a coach, I had the opportunity to meet Lauren Bennett, who's a player on the softball team. And we had this conversation, and she mentioned that she started a mental health initiative at her previous school. And that's really what started the whole idea of us applying for the Project 100 grant. So in this grant, what we received was the opportunity to then build some momentum about this theme of building connection, right? So we're coming out of pandemic, isolation, and we know there's been a lot of disconnection in the world, whether or not it's people changing jobs, people changing majors, changes in relationship status, just a lot of more isolation. And one of the things that we really want to do is figure out ways to build more connection. So the project of I Hear You project is really designed to help individuals, one, just build that connection, and two, it really has this mental health lens and this focus of well-being. So what is it? Well, it's a project that really focuses on becoming certified as a mental health first aid provider. I mentioned this idea of physical health, right? Being able to put a Band-Aid on a cut. Well, again, how do we take care of ourselves in a mental way? What is our mental health first aid protocol? If we're feeling sad, alone, loneliness, feeling like a failure, what do we do about those? Well, what's so powerful about this type of project is, one, it's a certification that allows individuals to identify what are the indicating signs or things that to look for if someone may be struggling, whether or not it's particular mental health issues, whether or not it's substance related, whether or not it's just observing behaviors and kind of deeply listening to what people are going through. And this really allows us to be able to create these resources and educate students here on campus, faculty, staff, to be able to understand what are these things. So it's an 8-hour training, and I'll show a little, well, actually I've got an example here. So there's a tag, so this is actually on my keychain. This is a tag that really allows an identification. So if someone goes through the mental health first aid training, they pass a quiz test, they become certified. And what this does, this indicates, okay, on campus when I'm wearing this, or a student's wearing this on their backpack, coworker has it on their purse or keys, then this person is a safe person to talk to, right? It's a visual representation that this person has a certain level of competency and deep care for building connection and understanding some basics of mental health. I'm not a mental health expert. They're not able to diagnose. They're not able to say this is what someone needs, or say, oh, you need medication. It's not what it's about. But it's about creating an opportunity for someone who may be feeling something that they're not able to really kind of understand or articulate, but they need to go connect with someone else. And that's that visual representation that I think is so powerful. And we've started a pilot project. We have 22 individuals that have been trained so far, both athletic staff and students and athletes, and RAs. We kind of built that, and then we're going to be launching this even more in the fall and further spring semesters to really kind of gain some opportunities to build that connection. Part of this project kind of being created at Malone University, which is where Lauren Bennett attended, was their counseling center was limited in being able to address all the counseling needs of campus. And one of the things that they found was being able to meet students where they are, where they may be struggling. In the goal of connecting is to meet people where they are. And they may not necessarily be in a traditional counseling setting, but that may be a student athlete who just had a bad game, right? They didn't do well, or they failed a test, right? And being able to build that kind of authentic connection is really the goal behind this project. We're looking at the opportunity to, as I said, train more students as a way to then meet those students when they're in need, right? Whether or not it's a game that they didn't do as well, a breakup, a failed exam, how to be able to, students be able to meet each other at this kind of level. And because of the training, it helps teach what are those things to look for, right? Facial expressions, words, statements, to really kind of deeply understand and listen to someone. And then by knowing that someone has this tag and has this with them, it really helps someone feel safe. Someone knows that, hey, I may not know this person, but at least I know that they have this certain approach that they're going to take, and what we talk about is helpful. And because it's helpful, it maybe then connects them with resources. And it may not necessarily involve traditional counseling. Maybe it's just being a part of a club or an organization, or getting connected with something in the community. And that's really where this initiative for the mental health first aid, it's a national initiative, right? So there's college campuses, employers, employees that have gone through this all throughout the country. So it isn't just specific to Northwood, but it's something kind of much larger. As I mentioned before too, just the COVID and mental health kind of rebound, right? Building that connection, meeting people where they are, because we know there's still a tremendous amount of stigma associated with mental health being. And that doesn't necessarily mean that someone has to come to a counseling office to receive some help or receive some assistance. This is really about being able to meet people where they are and kind of, yeah, when they need that assistance, being available to be able to help them. So how have we been able to accomplish this? One of the ways is going to the pilot group that we started with, and we went to athletics, and we presented this information to all the coaches and athletic staff, and we started with a kind of a nomination process. So for those coaches that knew students, whether or not they kind of knew their personalities or just things that they've shared with them, and this was a great way to kind of start with a group that had more focus and more desire to want to be connected with mental health. The goal is we really want to create this as common as mental health or as CPR, right? So first aid, CPR, again, going back to the example of physical health, we look at this as just as important, right? We often put more emphasis on the physical health world. If somebody has a sinus infection, you go get a medication, you go take care of what you need to take care of. But when it comes to, again, that kind of loneliness, that isolation, those more negative feelings, what do we do to address those? One of the things that we've really had the fortunate opportunity because of Project 100 support and funding is we've been able to offer this free of charge. So, and as a way to continue that and that sustainability of one of the things that I know really like to think about when we talk about, Project 100 grants is that sustainability component. And that'll allow myself and others here on campus to become trainers of trainers. So that way we can keep that kind of initiative going. That it doesn't just hinge on one person's passion or one person's ability to be able to train everyone, that it's really, again, that multifaceted approach that becomes so ingrained in what we do that it starts to have this kind of just natural growth effect that it really has profound impact on creating that campus wellness and that campus culture to support those individuals here. And again, those are the same kind of, I think, initiatives that we think about when we talk about corporate wellness and how to build that connection, how to build employee satisfaction. And one of the companies that's doing a really great job at this is Deloitte. They're a huge international, right, corporation, 300,000 employees, and they have some pretty big initiatives. So any of those you out there today want to just know a little bit more about kind of the corporate wellness structure, there's some great initiatives that Deloitte has out there. They have a whole assessment that they did in January of 21. So really some really relative recent data also just helps inform, some things to do when it comes to creating that idea, that lens of wellness. So again, we talk about the first aid, the mental health first aid training. Just some examples here of kind of what it does. Mentioned before, of increasing skill sets so that people can notice these particular things that might be going on in someone's life, whether or not it's what they say, how they're acting. There's an action plan that comes out of this. It's called ALGAE. And what that does is it just gives someone a protocol to follow, right? So if I know what this SAFE protocol is, and the SAFE protocol is designed by years and years of research, knowing that this approach is a safe approach to help someone that may be struggling with some mental health needs or issues. It allows the individuals during the training to actually practice, right, real life situations, scenario-based types of things. It really helps them identify, understand, and then respond. Going through mental health first aid training is not going to make someone a counselor, as I mentioned earlier, but it is going to help them feel competent, that they can help the individual identify what might be going on, understand what they might need, and then connect them with that next level resource. And that's where the identify, understand, and respond really kind of builds that. I also think it's a resume builder, right? So for many of our students, kind of thinking about their next careers and kind of building some of those things, it's valid for 3 years. So, we have our incoming freshmen that we're going to do some initiatives with, and then, sophomores and juniors. It's saying, hey, I may also have a CPR certification, but look, I also have this other certification that means that I bring this other set of skills that's extremely valuable. And as I mentioned and showed earlier, this is kind of the tag that's used to create a visual kind of component. So the goal, my dream, is that students are walking around on campus, you're going to see a bunch of green tags, right? You're going to see faculty are going to be sitting in meetings, and they're going to be right out on the desk or out on the chairs that they might be sitting in. There may be a alumni events or different things that are happening on campus, and you're going to see these green tags, and it's going to start to kind of really be a part of the initiative here on campus, be able to be seen. So we're really excited about just, again, talking about mental health, campus wellness, initiatives that we're doing here, and really appreciative of all the generous opportunities that the alumni has provided for us through the Project 100 grant. It really kind of sparked this whole initiative. So we're just really excited to share this and be here. Last little bit here is we have some upcoming trainings. Those that may be staff here on this call or know someone that might be interested. But we do have some things coming up this fall and spring semester. We'll be rolling those out on a regular basis. If anyone has any questions or they'd like to reach out to me directly, email address at sovisan@northwood.edu to just be able to have a conversation and answer any questions that you may have specifically about I Hear You Project or mental health first aid certifications. We're getting close on time here.
Thanks so much, Andy. If anyone has any questions for Andy, please feel free to put them in the chat or the QA feature. I know Andy mentioned Project 100, and we do have some of our Project 100 donors today, so thank you for joining, and also thank you for supporting Project 100. If any of you on the call want to learn more about Project 100, we have the information on our website, but what it is each semester you would donate $100, and there's 100 alumni, so we compile all that money to give a $10,000 grant to a student group that applies on campus. So I Hear You Project was our program that was funded last fall. We just met earlier this week on Tuesday evening, and our spring project is the student life. They are going to Aqua Access is what their group is called, and they want to put water bottle filling stations across campus because there's areas in the dorms where students don't have access to be able to fill up their water bottles. So that's our project for this semester. Let's see. We got a question for you, Andy. Can you please elaborate on the cognitive behavioral therapy and what situations or personalities does it target so they can really benefit from it?
Sure. So cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is a evidence-based program that's probably been researched for 30 plus years. And CBT is really used in a multitude of different settings when it comes to addressing mental health concerns or needs, whether or not it's anxiety, depression, suicidal risk assessment, some of the other kind of well-known like borderline personality disorder, bipolar. Cognitive behavioral therapy is kind of used as a foundation for a lot of different types of therapists. I think back in the day we used to hear a lot more about Freud and Freudian kind of therapy and counseling and that kind of psychodynamic kind of approach. And this is kind of I'd say a more evidence-based approach that is taught more in colleges and trainings as a good, safe foundation to use to help identify problems and come up with solutions, right? The approach that I've always taken to counseling and therapy is how do I work myself out of a job? Kind of a unique way to approach things, but it's worked really well over the last 18 years. You identify a problem, and then you're creating an opportunity for the individual to become independent as possible and create interventions that are sustainable so that that person can continue to thrive on their own outside of the world of therapy and counseling.
Another question for you. Are there any other events that have resulted from the I Hear You Project on campus?
Yeah, actually, we're really excited. So for those of you that are in the Midland area on this call that would like to be able to come support, tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, we're going to be at the softball game. And I mentioned Lauren Bennett. It's kind of the creator of the I Hear You Project. So she's on the softball team. So this is kind of a great place to launch a little bit of our initiative here. We're going to have a tent, giving away some food and some T-shirts. And really just, again, creating information, creating space to provide that information get in front of more students and let them know about these opportunities that exist. And yeah, we're really excited to have that. Some other great opportunities coming up. So in Saginaw Valley plays Northwood this year. We're going to be doing a football game, and that'll be at Saginaw Valley. We will then also in October be having a mental health week during mental illness week, and that will be a couple of soccer games and volleyball as a way to, again, just kind of be in front of students, provide information, give away some t-shirts, and just really build some of that initiative that we've started here so far.
Awesome. I don't see any other questions, so I think if anyone has any other questions, please submit them. We'll give it maybe one more minute to see if anyone else has any. But thank you again, Andy, for joining us today. We look forward I'm excited about the event tomorrow at the softball games, and we look forward to having everyone join us next month for our May webinar. And I don't think we have any other questions. So thanks again, Andy.
Thank you so much.
We look forward to seeing everyone next month.
Thanks, everyone.